Hello, and welcome to the Trail Manners Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Manning, coming to you from the beautiful trails in Ogden, Utah, but connecting you to wherever trail, ultra, and mountain running takes us. We'll bring trail running to life with amazing athletes, discuss the latest topics, epic journeys, and get you stoked for your next trail adventure. We're sharing the moments that make life special, because even a rough day on the trail beats a good day indoors, and nothing beats time spent with good friends and great stories. Catch us here weekly for your dose of dirt, vert, and good vibes. So now it's time to top off your water, grab some cheese curds, and join us for this week's podcast, where we take you deep into the heart of our sport. It's go time. Hello, and welcome to episode number 313 of the Trail Manners Podcast. Our guest today, returning, is Mr. Preston Wood. The Trail Manners Podcast is produced for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at trailmanners.com. Come back often, and please feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Trail Manners. And please don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate us on iTunes. If you're so inclined, Trail Manners would really appreciate any contribution via our Patreon account at patreon.com/trailmanners. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get after it. All right, welcome back to the Trail Manners Podcast. We have got a returning guest we've been waiting for to come back in. You've heard him a few weeks ago. We got Preston Wood on. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
This looked pretty good. I didn't do a mic check, and that was it.
I was a little worried about that.
I was too, but I'm like, you know what? I've done a couple of these. I'm going to wing it, and it worked. So, well, welcome back to the show. You are fresh off a haircut, right?
For sure. Right before I left, I got a haircut.
Okay, because I just got one too, so haircuts recognize haircuts. And you just got back from the island of Oahu.
I did.
How long you been back?
We got back on Thursday night. We got home about 9 o'clock, so I was a little hesitant to do a non-red-eye flight because the last time we did a red-eye on the way back, and I was worried about how that would affect the flow of life, but I actually think wasting the whole day traveling was actually better for the transition back.
Yeah. So you guys flew out in the morning?
Yeah. Okay. So we left Hawaii at like 7:45 in the morning, and then landed in Salt Lake at 7:30 at night.
That's all right, though.
Yeah.
I did the last time I went, or to Kauai, we did the at the time, it was like the only thing we could get out was late, so we left like at 9 at night.
Yep.
And went to Seattle, spent like 147 hours there, it felt like, and then flew home, and it was like 2 days.
Yeah.
So we're going back to Kauai in May, and we're doing that. We're leaving early in the morning and coming home same day.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
And the last time we did the same thing, like on the way back, we flew out at like 10 o'clock at night in Honolulu and landed in LA, and then like laid on the floor for 4 hours and then came back, and it was horrible. Yeah. So I was worried about it because it's like, oh, we're wasting the whole day, but it was pretty good.
Good.
Yep.
Well, launch date of this podcast, just so everybody's aware, is going to be Tuesday, January, what is that, 25th, right?
Yes.
So we're recording on the 23rd, so you just barely got back.
Yep.
You went over with a lot of people to run the Hurt 100-mile race in Oahu. And I hope you listened to the first time we had Preston on, because it was a good show. You know, he's been out there before. Before he left, we talked to him about his first experience, plus preparing for this one, thoughts going into it, and now we get the recap. So before we go into anything further, the numbers to me, and I don't know if this is normal. I really don't. And I probably could have done a little more research to check. 46 finishers and 77 DNFs.
Yes.
So 123 runners started, 46 finished. That's like a 37% finish rate. Is that low?
That's a little low. It's not crazy low.
Okay.
Usually I think it's about 45% finisher rate. It was a hard year though, statistically speaking. Yeah. I don't know why. But yeah, it was lower than normal, but not by a ton. It's I think they make it as hard as possible. Just we'll talk about it as we go on. Just the time of year, if you're not living on Oahu or someplace warm, I think it's just nearly impossible to train.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, 37% I mean, even if it was 45, that's still close to 50.
Yep.
Right. So that's still half.
Like I go back to, again, Wasatch this year was a really rough year. Last year. And I think it was still like a 65% finisher rate. Yeah. And that was a bad year, and like, but this is like 35%. Oh yeah, that's, I mean, kind of bad, but not that bad.
Yeah. 37%. Yeah. So the women's side, there were 13 finishers and 16 DNF. So almost 50% of the women.
Because they're tougher.
We know that.
Yeah.
Debbie Livingston from Bolton, Connecticut. She was the first female, 7th overall in 29 hours and 9 minutes. Anna Albrecht from Honolulu was 2nd for the females and 9th overall, so 2 women in the top 10, which if you've ever historically listened to this podcast, you know that Joel and myself have been talking for years how that's going to be a norm, right? And it women in top 10s of 100 milers, and it is, right? 3rd was Mele DeMille from Waikolua, Hawaii in 29:42. Yeah. On the men's side, Peter Mortimer from Flagstaff was 23:59:34. So just under 24 hours.
Snuck it in.
And we all know what sub 24, no matter what 100 miler at, is kind of like pretty special.
Yeah.
Not that I would know personally, but second was Sergio Florian from Kauai, Hawaii, 25:30, and Corey Longsden was 3rd. Omaha, Nebraska.
Yep.
26:03. And we'll just skip down, but 6th place for the men was Ian Ferris here from Utah. 5th place. 5th. Yeah, you're right. 5th place. Yeah, 27:19. So he was 5th. Someone from Utah came and did strong there.
That guy's approach is just a little different. So me and him started together. We're good friends and ran the first 7.5 miles together. And his thing was he thought he could even split every lap.
Oh, wow.
And he basically did.
Wow.
So we were in like 50th place there at the first check-in, and then he just marched his way up through the field. He's a pretty good hiker.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we had Tara Warren on as well before heading over to her. I mean, her dog ran into her, so she had a little injury going into it. But, we talked about the same thing, the hiking, the training, all that. And before I forget, the finishers on the men, 33 finishers, 61 DNFs. Yeah. So, again, almost 50%.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, as far as those go, they were pretty close. But that was the first thing I went to was how many finished because I was tracking it here, just watching people going through. And I was like, holy cow. Like, that was pretty nutty.
Yeah, well, and you just look at like the local group here. So there were 7 Utahns out there.
Yeah.
We had 2 finishers. And it was 7 really experienced, really good runners.
Yeah, Sylvia Greer.
Yeah,
right?
Sylvia, me, Jake Kilgore, Tara, Ian,
Trevor.
Ernie, and Trevor.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so we had quite the crew out there that pretty experienced, pretty good runners. And that if that tells you anything about what it's like.
And Trevor's won it before.
Yeah, and Trevor's won it. And so the only 2 people that finished were Ernie and Ian. And Ernie at 67 didn't look 67 out there.
That's
it was
awesome.
pretty incredible.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Gives me hope.
Yeah.
Not for that race, but in general. Just in general, it gives me hope. So I think what the listeners really want to know, I know they're out there just like Eric ask. Did you return anything to Costco this trip?
No.
You didn't?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I got asked by a few people.
Did you?
Yeah.
I think Costco was on alert. They were watching you walk through
the
door.
Yeah, they were. I was worried about that. So, no, I just used Ziploc bags.
There you go.
Yeah.
Didn't return those, right?
Didn't return.
Okay,
good. I mean, I could have probably. But, yeah, I did not return anything to Costco. Didn't return those chocolate-covered macadamias.
You brought some home, though,
right?
I
brought them home.
There you go.
I should have brought you some. We have a ton. We're not.
They're my favorite, so yeah.
I'll have to get you a box.
All I have here is my Dog Head 60-minute IPA, which is doing me very special right now. That's my sponsor of my personal preference today. All right, so let's talk about it. So, in my eyes, I mean, I saw you quite a bit, actually, more than I normally do.
Yeah.
Within the last month running, and I tried to share a few miles with you.
Oh, we shared miles.
We tried.
No, it was good.
You were talking, I was nodding and grunting so I could answer questions. But it appeared to me that you went into the race in trained well, good shape.
For sure.
I think you went into it. Your training was good. You've done it before. So you were nervous. I don't know if you were really nervous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very.
I just want to make sure you know that because I was talking to people that saw you on the trail like, he's nervous.
Yeah.
Right? And I get it. And
yeah.
I think you should be. Did they ever wear off?
I mean, yeah, I was I was nervous in the sense that I knew how physically challenging it was going to be, and we'll get into this, but I was just nervous because the last time I got my butt kicked pretty hard, like physically was just wrecked. And so I was nervous about that again because it took me 9 hours to go the loop last time, one time. And so excuse me. But I was just nervous about that. But yeah, once I got there, I was feeling pretty good.
And so real quick, those that may not have heard the last show or as familiar with it, a loop on this race is about...
They say 20 miles, and it runs like about 25, but it's probably shorter than that, but not by
like
much.
17, 18 potentially.
Yeah,
as well.
it's like, so my watch, I turned on the Supermax good GPS setting, and it got every loop right at 18.6.
Okay. Well,
so
close.
Yeah. But realistically, if somebody wants to say it's 20 miles, it's pretty dang close.
You're not going to argue because how you feel. Right?
You feel like it's maybe even a 50K.
I don't know. When they say it's a 20-mile loop, you're like, I wish.
Yeah. And so, 20-mile loop 5 times. And it's not really a loop. It's a series of sections that you double back on. So like you go up one climb, then you go down to the aid station, and then you turn around and go right back up the way you came. Then you go down to the next aid station, and then you turn around and go right back to where you came from. And so you're just doing the same sections over and over.
And it's the same loop.
Same direction,
if you will,
yes.
Every time. So you go around it 5 times, but it's the same thing. It doesn't change.
Yeah,
right?
and multiple sections you're going over 10 times.
Okay. Wow.
Like several sections you're doing 10 times.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I heard it happened. People taking wrong turns.
Yes.
How, it's easy to say when you're not there, right? But when you're there, how would that be if you've done the loop and it's out and backs? Is it just like mental fatigue?
Yeah, for me it was just
spider
total
trails.
It was total mental fatigue. Like where I missed the turn, so we can get into that a little later, but where I missed the turn, it was just a total mental lapse. Like I just missed it. Like it's not because it wasn't marked. Like when I got into the aid station, I told them I missed a turn. They're like, well, were the markings there? And I was like, pretty sure they were there. Yeah,
I didn't see it.
Yeah,
but
and we can talk about that more in detail. But yeah, you just get mental fatigue, and you can't really look up ever at the race. It's something we talked about last time. You're just always looking down at your feet, and at the time I was kind of trying to talk myself out of a dark spot. I was actually on the phone with my wife trying to talk my way out of it.
Tell you about talking and running.
Yeah.
It's like texting and driving.
Yep.
It's dangerous.
It's very dangerous. I didn't fall though.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, well, let's go through it then. You get there. You got there early, a few days early.
Yeah, we flew out on the Thursday, which, in a non-COVID situation, I think is the best situation. We started to worry our flight was going to get canceled.
Yeah.
Luckily, we didn't have any issues with that. A few others did, but yeah, we were fine there. Got in Thursday, and then there was no pre-race meeting this year because of COVID. And so we did just a drive-through packet pickup, which was actually pretty slick.
Yeah.
On Friday, and then woke up and ran on Saturday.
What time the race start?
Starts at 6 a.m. Hawaii time, so 9
you're
a.m.
only
here.
You're only a day out, so you're still not on Hawaii time. Even though the clocks are there, your body, so you probably were up even earlier than normal.
Yeah. My body felt like it was later, right? Mm-hmm. So like that 9 a.m. felt like, or that 6 a.m. felt like 9 a.m. Yeah. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah. So you get to the start.
Yeah.
You see your peeps.
Yeah, get to the start, find Ian, find Ernie, find Trevor, talk to Sylvia. Didn't see Tara or Jake before the race. Obviously, you see everybody during the race.
Yeah.
But and the goal for me was to really dial back the pace and not worry about how fast I was going. And so Ian and I have done this at several hundreds, and usually if I stick with him for the first stretch, it puts me in a pretty good place. So we just kind of went out, and Sylvia was with us as we're going up the first climb, and we're just rolling along, and we kind of got into a spot where it was just me and Ian, and we could kind of go what pace we wanted to go, fly up the first climb, and then this is where things kind of got funny.
After the very first climb?
Yeah, just wait. So there you cross the road, and then there's actually the best section of trail, probably the whole race, is here. You cross the road, and then there's a really nice section where you can run, you can move really well, and we're going through, and then you go through the rooty part, like the top part, they call it Pua Flats, I think is the name of it, and it's just the Rudy section that it's just.
And
horrible.
we're saying Rudy like ROOTY.
Yeah.
Not like Rudy.
No,
Rudy,
not like
from
Rudy
Notre
Gobert.
Dame. Yeah, or Rudy Gobert from Utah,
or
but
Rudy,
even Rudy from
Notre Dame.
From
that
Rudy.
guy. Yeah.
So Rudy.
Yeah, Rudy. So we get through that, and then we're going on the first downhill. And the first downhill, last time I was just bombing like a numbskull, and it really probably ruined my race. And this time, me and Ian are just going down real easy. We just kept waiting for people to catch us because we were going pretty slow.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the leaders are coming back, and we're getting close to kind of the Manoa Falls area, where that's where all the tourists start to be.
Yeah.
And one of the leader guys, like we see Trevor, we see Anthony Lee go by. He was in first, and then Trevor was second. And then there's this big group behind them. And one of the guys is like, "There's a gate." And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, Ian's done like 1 million loops out there. It's like his 6th start or something. And I'm like, what gate is this guy talking about? And because there's a gate that you go through, but it's like on the 3rd leg of the loop. So it's like, yeah, there's a gate, but why are we talking about the gate? And we get there, and all of a sudden there's this gate. It's like 6 feet. Well, it was probably 8 feet high.
Yeah.
Across the trail, and somebody had locked it.
Oh, nice.
And so you could either go down the cliff through the bamboo or up the cliff and around. And like we're talking like you had to climb 6 feet up to kind of get around this gate because the brush is so thick they don't need to put a fence.
Yeah.
They just need to put a gate.
A gate.
And so because there's wild pigs out there that they're trying to keep out of certain areas. And, I don't know if somebody was playing a prank or what, but I don't think that gate has ever been locked.
Yeah.
And especially talking to locals later in the day. But so, we instantly had to stop running and like scurry up and around this gate thing. And then one of this guy who's in charge of the trail marking was like right behind us. And he starts letting out curse words and he's like, "What? How is this locked? What's going on?" And like it's like just another obstacle. I mean, it's just hurt. And
Yeah.
what
else, right?
And so he starts making phone calls and he's like calling people. He's like, "Somebody needs to bring me bolt cutters to the aid station. I'm gonna cut this lock." And so he did cut it, but we had to go around it there and then around it on the way back up. But then it was open the rest of the day.
Wow.
So that's how the day started, with a giant gate.
My favorite part of that whole thing was when you said numbskull. I haven't heard that word in a long time.
I was trying to use not offensive terms.
No, we'll hashtag the numbskull.
Numbskull.
I like that.
Yeah.
We'll call that. All right, so you get around the gate.
Yeah.
So that's where it started getting interesting first. But
Yep.
again, it's just like, everybody's dealing with it. The guy's going to fix it on the next few loops. You get back around the gate on the way out.
Yeah.
Did you still feel pretty good, though?
Yeah,
I mean, it took a slow down that first downhill.
Yeah, still feeling really good. And so Ian left me at that aid station down there. It's the Paradise Park, Manoa Falls aid station where they all dress up as pirates. It's always their theme. But I caught up with Jake Kilgore there, and we went for a little while together. But he was going a little fast for me. I was just trying to really dial in my pace and, got up the next climb, and then you go down to Nu'uanu, where it's the hardest descent and climb of the race.
How long is that section?
So it's pretty short. So from Manoa over to Nu'uanu is only like 5 miles.
Okay.
But you go up, 1,800 feet and then down 1,800 feet over to the other side. And there's some really pretty views actually on that section. You kind of get out on this ridge line and you can see Honolulu to whatever side that is, to
Your
the left.
Yeah,
I,
like that.
I don't know
We'll
what direction it
yeah.
is. And then you kind of drop down, then you can see the Poly Highway to the right. Like it's really
Pretty
beautiful.
Nice.
But then this is the section where you're like jumping off boulders and like kind of scrambling, and it's just
little
really
parkour.
Yeah,
Little
it
parkour.
is very much parkour. And
Parkour.
Yeah, and so you drop down into Nu'uanu, and everything was fine. Climbed back out, feeling great. And then the next leg from Nu'uanu back to the start finish to Makiki is like 7.5 miles again. So the first and the third leg are the longest. So you climb back up to that general location in the middle, and then you go to the Manoa Cliffs Trail, which is a really nice trail. And I was just moving really well through that first loop. And the second loop, more of the same.
So what was your time on the first loop?
First loop was like 5 hours and 15 minutes.
So how'd you feel about that, though? I mean, because
it was a little slower than I thought it would be, but I felt fine. I was feeling really good.
Did you say the first time you ran the first loop was in a 4-hour range?
4 hour, 50 minute.
Okay, so about 20 minutes slower.
20 minutes
so not
slower.
Huge.
No.
That's a minute a mile.
Yeah, and I thought I'd be around 5-ish hours.
Yeah.
But the very first climb was maybe a little slow. We started in the back a little far.
Okay.
And it's up. They call it Hog's Back, because it kind of looks like a razorback.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, anyways, that probably cost us, because that was my slowest climb up that the whole day was on my first lap.
Yeah. Conga line type stuff. There's people and
Yeah. And so I felt really good about it, and I was like, okay, now if I can run this second loop, in 5.5 to 5:45, like I'll feel really good about that.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I did. I kept a pretty steady pace, was moving really well. Everything was going really great. I started to worry about my lighting situation that lap, because I forgot how dark it gets even at like 3 p.m. in some of the jungle sections.
Yeah.
And I got to Oahu again on my second lap, so that's the second aid station on my second lap. And I asked somebody there, do I need a light? And the guy was like, no, because this section that you're going to be on is the best lit section.
Okay.
And it was, it was a local guy. And so I got back to the nature center in plenty of time to get my lights. And I went back.
Was that your second loop?
That was my second loop.
And what was your time
It was
on
like,
that one?
I think it was like 5:45.
Okay, and you just said 5:30, 5:45.
Yeah.
So
and
again, you finished your second loop, and you were like, boom, I'm right where I'm good with. Okay.
Exactly. And so I got done with that second loop, and I was like, man, I think I'm back here almost the exact same time as my 2 laps last time.
Okay.
But I'm in way better shape physically. And everything was going good, and I get up that next climb, and, the whole time I didn't really get passed by many people, and I was passing people. I was moving really well.
Yeah.
And I get all the way to the top of that first climb when you're going to drop down again into Manoa. And for some reason, I started having like just these mental like weaknesses surface where I was just like, I don't know if I want to be out here. And that's where it kind of started. And I ran into Ian there. He was on his way back up. He'd already been down to the aid station and was back up. And he stopped me, and he's like, hey, don't be doing this already. Like, he could tell.
Yeah.
I mean, me and him have spent a lot of hours together in some situations where I'm really uncomfortable, and he just likes to tease me because he's super comfortable. But, and I had seen, I'd had discussions with Trevor off and on at the day, and I didn't know it this time, but he had just dropped down below.
Trevor did?
Yeah. Him and Ian had rolled into that Manoa aid station together, and then Trevor had dropped.
The pirate one.
Yeah, the pirate one. He walked the plank.
Yep.
And so Ian talked to me. He's like, well, put in some music, do something. You got to get your mind right. Because physically I was fine. I mean, we can get into this as we go on after I tell you how it all came to an end. But so I put music in, tried to get my mind off of just the enormity of the day ahead.
Yeah.
Because this is the thoughts that I was having were like, okay, my kids are here. They just missed a whole day of me with them having fun at the beach. I'm gonna be marching around out here for at least another who knows how many hours, 16 hours. Like I'm gonna miss a whole other day. Like these are the thoughts that I was having. And it caught me off guard because historically with me, I mean, I've DNF'd plenty. I mean, I wouldn't say I have a huge problem, but it happens to me. And usually it's because physically I go. And when I physically go, then I get really down on myself.
Yeah.
And so this one it caught me off guard because I was physically fine.
Yeah.
Like I was doing everything how I had thought I would do it. I felt really strong. I'd had a few small issues, but I had resolved them all. Like things were going well physically. Nutrition-wise, everything was going down really easier and better than I thought. Like things were going well, and then these thoughts started creeping in my mind, and it just wore on me. And then I put the music in, and I got into Manoa feeling really good again.
Okay.
Like I was moving well. I mean, I was still running stuff where people were having a tough time running.
So people want to know music. What are you listening to?
Oh, so
Come on.
This is where I made a mistake. I didn't have a playlist ready. but like we've talked about this before. I'm a big like 90s hip hop guy.
Nice.
Like big time. And so I just put on whatever I had downloaded, and because I didn't want to turn my cell phone on to waste battery. And so like there was some weird stuff coming on.
Give me a couple songs.
Well, I mean, just some oldies stuff. I can't even really remember some of it. I have some weird like EDM, like electronic dance music on there that I don't know why I got into that for a little while, but that was the stuff that was coming on, and I was like, man, I really wish that this was like Snoop Dogg right now, because that would get my mind off of it. But yeah, I did have some good stuff come on. Like there was some Wu-Tang Clan that came on that got my spirits up. But I wish
nothing like Wu-Tang to lift the spirits, man.
Hey, it is, right? No, you have to protect your neck. But sorry, that stuff gets my mind off.
That's
of things,
all right.
though. If I would have had a playlist, I would have been much better prepared. But I didn't.
So then tell me that. What would a playlist consist of?
A playlist would have
like
consisted of like a legit playlist would have consisted of like Run the Jewels, Wu-Tang Clan, Tribe Called Quest, Snoop, Dre, like. Yeah, that's that sort of stuff.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Listeners are typing their phones right now trying to find some of that.
I mean, really, like, there's this radio station I listen to on Apple Music called Bars, where it's
with a
just
Z?
With an S.
Oh, dang it.
And so it's like real rap, real hip hop, where it's not just like radio stuff where they're actually rhyming, and that's the stuff I like.
And they're not rhyming.
Yeah, well, they are rhyming. Like they actually flow.
They're
like
lyrical gangsters,
like
Preston.
Nas, right? Like if people know who Nas, people are probably listening like they've never even heard of any of these people. And I'm just like talking about Nas, and like Nas just dropped a new album, even though it's 2022, and people are like, "Well, I thought he was popular in '91," and it's like, "Well, he was,
still is, baby,
still is
longevity."
Yeah, he had a really good album just dropped. It's all right. Anyways. So I started listening to the music, and it did help.
Okay.
Got in and out of Manoa, and again, like you can see people, and I'm seeing people that I'm gaining on. Like I'm gaining on people all day. I'm moving really well. I get back up the next climb, and I see Ian again because he's coming back up from Oahu, and I'm coming back up from Manoa, and it's like it's hard to visualize. Just look at the map, and you'll understand what I'm meaning here. But you're just crossing people all day.
Yeah,
and. You know, it was on that climb where I saw Tara too. One of the first times I'd really talked to her, and you know, it's just the course is overwhelming.
Yeah,
we had a conversation about that there, and I maybe said a bad word, and she laughed at me, but because I don't think she'd ever heard me say a bad word.
Hey,
before.
we were listening to some Wu-Tang. So
yeah, I was listening to
Wu-Tang. You never know what's coming out at that
you're
point.
Right. Old Dirty Bastard was rolling, and so I just thought that was normal.
You were in the mood.
Yeah. Sorry, nobody gets this, but that's okay.
No, there's a lot of people. You'd be surprised at the diversity of the listener and what they know. Generational as well.
There we go.
So you saw Tara. You were talking about the challenge of the course.
challenge of the course, and you know, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
The course is, and I was ready for
what
that
you
part.
Knew. Yep.
But what I wasn't ready for was the mental game when I felt good, because that's never happened to me before.
Like, what's going on here? This is weird.
And I've thought about this a lot since, and I've talked to about 1 million people. Anybody who will listen, I've talked to about it, and just trying to piece together what it was, and I think it just caught me off guard. You know, I was with Shane Martin this morning, and we went on a little jog, and you know, he described it as just kind of an overconfidence thing. Like, let's say you have a vice or something that you've really worked to overcome, and then you're like, oh, I've got this.
Yeah.
And then you slip up, and then all of a sudden you're just screwed again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, where I've had these issues in the past, but I thought that I had overcome the part when physically things are going good, I'm fine. And then it came at me from a different angle mentally,
but do you think that has to do with like a very specified training or thought process, right? Like you went into hurt going, okay, last time, this is where I missed, right? And so that was your such like laser focus that we all know in life, but in trail or ultra running, there's these other factors. I mean, I talked about nutrition, there's weather, there's all these things.
Yes.
So do you think you were just so laser focused on solving a problem that maybe, and it's not to say these other ones aren't things you worked on, but they weren't in your head, like you weren't thinking about
this.
Right?
That is exactly what happened, because I I got so beat up physically the last time because of how I paced, because of my lack of preparedness, that this time I was so prepared physically and had exactly what I wanted to feel like going into it. I had 0 time goals. I just was like, okay, this is how I'm going to approach this race so that I can finish. And physically, I did that.
Yeah.
But because of that, I probably left a blind spot for the mental preparedness part of what's it going to be like to not have crew? What's it going to be like to have my wife who loves to crew me not be able to because you were only allowed, and this is a COVID rule.
Yeah.
You were only allowed one person.
Yeah.
And so with my kids, she couldn't. My kids are 7 and 5. We can't just say, "Hey, have fun at the beach,
Go to the
kids."
beach. Here's $10.
Yeah. We could.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Come home as just you and your wife.
Yeah, we would have lost our kids.
Yeah.
But so that wore it. Not having a crew, even though like I'm totally capable of doing it by myself. Just I wasn't ready for those things to bother me. And they did. And so, Ian again was really positive. I was feeling better the last time I saw him. And then I started to go down into Oahu. And I was like, man, do I really want to be out here? And that's when I called Katie.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, I'm struggling here. Talk me through this. Because she'll do that with me when I'm, on a long run or something alone. And she'll just talk to me and then I'll feel better. And then it's like, okay, thanks, hon. Bye. And
got what I needed. See you later.
Exactly. And she's so supportive, and it probably hurt her to not be able to crew as much as it hurt me.
Yeah.
Because she really likes it. I'm really lucky that way that she enjoys the scene as much as I do. And so I'm dropping down in there, and I'm talking to her, and then that's when I hear the aid station music at Nuuanu way before I should have.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit,
missed a turn.
Yeah, I missed a turn. But I was already like at the aid station, and I was like, okay, I know what the rules are. We know what the rules are, right? You miss a turn. The rules are you go back to where you missed the turn, and then you get on course and do it the right way. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to go in here and tell them what happened and see what they say.
Maybe they'll let me do 2 out max on the next loop.
Yeah, I was just like, I don't know. And so I get in there, and first off, they were kind of shocked that I told them what had happened and was just so blunt about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, the aid station captain was like, well, you know what you've got to do? You got to go back. And I was like, well, how far is it? And nobody really knew how far it was.
Backwards.
Because they didn't really understand where I'd because like that section, there's like several trails you could take. It's actually, last time I didn't even realize how many options there were. Because I was just so focused on the physical beating I was taking.
So the turn you missed, I'm going to go back to that.
Yeah.
You missed a turn. If you would have went on that turn, would you have gotten to another aid station or to another checkpoint?
No.
So nobody would have known.
Nobody
if you would have rolled
known.
into that aid station, and they would have not
GPS
known the better.
is so sketchy. Like somebody would have just thought that it was like a bad GPS log. I could have totally cheated, but that's just then what would I feel like a cheater?
And the reason I bring that up is because again, this is our sport, right? It's like there's a place to it. You're only cheating yourself,
exactly,
right? Because you could have done that, finished the race, and I guarantee nobody would have known.
No, nobody.
Maybe one runner, right?
Yeah,
maybe.
Right?
But I appreciate you saying that, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about that, because I appreciate that, because this to me is what this sport's about. And I hate to say it, but I'm not going to say that. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that happened where they didn't tell on themselves. Because, again, you've got so much invested in this trip.
Yeah.
The whole trip as a family and everything, that it would be really easy to say, whew, that was a quicker section, and you missed a few miles. Right?
And really, that's where it was killing me is, so I get into the aid station, and, like, Jake Kilgore's there, so I'd caught back up to Jake, and, he knew I was right on his tail.
Yeah.
Like, he knew he wasn't very far ahead of me. And, like, so these are the people right around me. They wouldn't have even known.
Yeah.
And, like, but I'm not that guy.
No.
I'm not
but
out
I appreciate
there.
that. And anybody listening to this podcast, this is what the sport's about. And this is what we're going to be talking about even in future episodes is the sport, right? It's changing a lot every day, every year. And I'm not saying for the good or the bad. I'm just saying it's changing. But this is like old school to me. This is really old school to me, because not saying it's somebody would purposely do it now, but I mean, this is why I love this sport. There's so much of it that is on your honor. Like you look at a 100-mile course and it'd be super easy to do all kinds of stuff.
It hurt. Like it'd be super easy. Like there's several spots where if you knew where you were at.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So anyway, I'll let you keep going, but I wanted to bring that to attention because that's awesome to me.
Yeah.
It gave me goosebumps because I can't imagine what the thought process had to be. But knowing you, there wasn't any.
No,
there was only one quick boom, bluntness.
No, and Tara missed a turn too in a spot where, like, she took away that I saw the turn multiple times, and I actually know now, like, because there was actually a family hiking that section.
Yeah.
Like, and then I went the section of the race, and like they hiked it very slowly, faster than I went up and around. And, like, she almost got all the way there and then turned back. And, like, same thing, right? You just don't even think about it.
Yeah.
You just do what the rules are. But anyways, I went in there because I was kind of out of it. Like, oh, hey, I missed the turn. Trying to explain to him. And I was like, let me sit down here for a minute before I go back. Because at this point, I still wasn't totally resolved that I was going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd only been there for a few minutes, and then people who I had put time on were coming into the aid station. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, these are people that I had put like 15 or 20 minutes on, so I didn't even really cut the course.
Yeah.
And I'm like playing all these mind games, and I'm like, no, but I got to go back. So I start back down, and there's a stream crossing it's a river if you're in Utah. It's a stream if you're in Hawaii. And so I start to go back down to the stream crossing to backtrack, and that's when I was just like, I just don't want to do this right now. And I went back up and I dropped.
Yeah, mileage-wise,
it's 52
on the course.
By the official race markings.
So about half.
Just a little over halfway. It
seemed like a lot of people when I was looking at the the drop rate. A lot of people dropped there at mile 50.
Yeah, there or back at the nature center. And this is now that we've gotten to where I dropped and that it was just a total mental collapse on my part. We talked about the blind spots and. I've done a lot of thinking about like what could I have done to eliminate some of those. Mm-hmm. And I think having the kids there was hard. Yeah. Trevor mentioned the same thing to me. Like this is the first time he'd had his kids there.
Yeah.
It's a bigger distraction than you think.
Yeah.
So kudos to the people that take their kids there and are just tough because it was a distraction. I wish I would have had a pacer lined up. I know that I probably could have coaxed somebody into pacing me, a local.
Yeah.
But it's just better to just have somebody you can trust. So I think having somebody to just get my mind off of the monotony of it, because that's where you get in the trouble. Where I got into trouble at this is knowing how many more times you have to keep doing things, and it never gets easier.
Yep.
At a general 100-miler in the Rocky Mountains, you can look forward to, 20 miles of pretty easy running usually. I don't know. Would you say it maybe even more of like smooth downhill?
And I look at it too as even if you've run the race, if you're doing the same thing over, you always know what's coming again, right? So if it's a point to point or just one big loop or something like that,
you feel like you're putting stuff behind you.
Yeah, and you don't have to see it again. And so if there's a section, because my first ultra was a 4-loop 50K, and it wasn't hard. But I remember how hard it was mentally, right? Like I knew there was one, probably is just a hill now, but back in the day, I felt like it was a climb.
Straight up, yeah.
But it is that. It's that knowing what's ahead, exactly what's ahead, as opposed to, I ran this last year, so I know that, I got the plunge and dive, or I've got ranger dip, or I've got some, what's there, but it's one time and it's one thing. Where this, it's like, oh my God, I got to do this section again. I got to do this section again. Yeah.
And so, as I reflect on it, next time I go out, I'm going to have to just eliminate a lot of distractions. I don't know if we'll make a family trip out of it. That doesn't make Katie super pumped because the kids had a blast. I mean, we had a great trip in Hawaii.
Kids didn't miss Dad.
They didn't miss
you got
me.
back and did you win?
They were pretty confused in the morning, and they didn't care, obviously.
Yeah.
Because nobody really cares as much as we do.
No.
But anyways, she said, well, maybe we just come out after, so that we're not there to distract. And, because part of the issue, too, is just not being able to see him. Maybe if they had been able to come by, it wouldn't have even been an issue.
Could have been a pick-me-up.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah.
And so I've just played it in my mind over and over. But what it comes down to is I've just got to figure out a way to to get past these mental barriers that I put up for myself. And one of those barriers historically for me has always been I have pretty lofty goals and expectations. Mm-hmm. And this race I didn't. I just wanted to finish. And so that, again, I just wasn't ready for things that I had thought I moved on from to come back in a different way. And so I've just got to mentally be prepared every race and just know that if I don't just put my head down and keep moving, that mentally I'm gonna cave, because that's where I get weak.
Well, I think too, you know this, ultra running, and I'll say ultra, not in trail running, I'll say, it's the long game.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't ever just go nail it right away.
No.
Right? And if you do have that race that just everything falls into place, that's one time.
Yeah.
So it's always about going, doing, and taking something away. Whether you go back and do the same race or you go back to it or go to another race, it's like you mentioned, you were so laser focused on the physical side.
Yeah.
Right. So now you could say, okay, I know the physical side. I know what I got to do there. Right. And now it's like, okay, but there's this other section that maybe I need to tweak or work on, or maybe put more thought into. Maybe while it's on your run, you're thinking about that part of it. So I think, when we do these races, when we do these events, there's just a long game. I mean, how many people have tried to go out and do like the rim to rim FKT?
Yeah.
Lots of people, right? And they learn something every single time, but they rarely nail it. And when they do, it's when all that experience, training, putting all those columns together to make something full. So what you're saying, you look past something.
Yes.
I don't even say you look past it. You were just too focused somewhere else.
Yeah, and
because you knew though that other stuff comes into it. It's not like if you've had struggles with it before, but you knew your bigger struggle here was here.
Yeah.
Right. So let's get a strength there, and then you have this other thing. So you did mention something. I thought, and I could be wrong. I thought you said this was it, no matter what, for Hurt. Like this race was like, no matter how I do, I'm not going back. But what I'm hearing right now...
Well, because I thought I was going to finish. I was pretty convinced. And physically, I was ready to finish. I mean, like you mentioned, Anna Albrecht, she was 9th, right?
Yep.
Like, she was one of the few people that I wasn't gaining on, right? That, like, I was kind of right in there. She was probably 10 to 15 minutes ahead of me all day.
Okay.
Right? So, like, I was moving really well.
For a sub 30.
Yeah, and that's kind of like ideal. Like a sub 30 out there is a huge deal. Mm-hmm. Like it's a really hard race. Like I know that it's one of those things, like when we were talking before and you had mentioned, and I'll just use this as an example, like, oh yeah, I ran in Kauai, like I kind of have an idea what it's like, but this course is just so dumb. Like it's hard to explain, and that's what makes it so wonderful, because it is so hard. And the event is a world-class event put on by top of the top people.
Yeah.
They take care of you. They know what they're doing out there. But it's just so hard.
Well, I mean, you mentioned sub 30, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there were 11 people that finished sub 30.
Yeah.
Of the 11 out of 46.
Yeah.
So a very small percentage, finished sub 30, and sub 30 at other hundreds, right?
Oh yeah, you're talking about
isn't
3/4 of the field.
Yeah, I mean,
at tough hundreds even.
Yeah. Well, be careful though. I finished once sub 30 at Wasatch, and I still have that as my feather. So don't.
Well, that's a big deal at Wasatch too.
Thank you.
It's a huge deal. Your Wasatch time's better than mine, isn't it?
I doubt it.
I think it is.
I doubt that was back in the day. Yeah. That was when it was a crazy.
You were cooking.
But I mean, it's a tough course. So sub 30. So realistically, are you thinking about going out and trying it again then?
Yeah, I'd like to solve the problem out there.
So what do you think? What do you think? So saying that, what do you think is that quote unquote problem? What would you say? Okay, if I go back next year, this is how my training would change from this year.
Training, I wouldn't really change anything, because really with that race, and I talked about this with Terry. I ran into her this week here in town. I haven't been even back that long, but I ran into her. And you can't really simulate it here. Yeah. Like I don't know if you can simulate it anywhere.
Yeah.
But so my training I feel like was really good. I just have to. I just need to shore up my mental side of things and make sure that I have the right things in place to help me not drop.
So, I mean, you say you don't have to change anything, but that's something that has to change. So how would you because I mean, 100-mile races, big races, and a 50-mile, 50K, whoever you are, it's going to be a challenge, right? Some people, it's their first 50K.
And when I say I don't have to change anything, I mean like my mileage, my vert per week,
your physical training.
Yeah, my physical training, I don't. But for mental training, so
what would your advice be for people? Like, I mean, people are listening to this and they're connecting, right? Yeah. They're connecting with this, going, man, I struggle mentally. Whether it's what you just said, knowing what's ahead. Right, knowing how many have said that in their lives? I don't want to be out here that long. Right. So what's some advice? I mean,
so something I've thought about is like, how can I simulate that speed and that difficulty here on runs? And something I've thought about for several years is like in the Uintas, things get really slow sometimes. Right, the Uinta Mountains here in Utah, it's our highest mountain range. It's pretty remote wilderness. Very technical and slow terrain, not necessarily really steep, but just slow. So it's something I've been talking about is trying to do the Highline Trail, just because it's slow. Like I've done it. It's hard. And so like the FKT on that is like, so the trail for the established FKT is like 80 miles. And I think Jared Campbell did it in like 22 hours or 23 hours. And Jared's not slow, and he's really good at bad terrain. And so that kind of puts it into perspective what it is. So, like, I just know that it'd be long and slow and hard. And I just am such a runner as far as terrain goes. Like, when it's smooth terrain, I'm really pretty good. And I've just got to get better at going slow.
There's some climbs.
Yeah, for sure.
So here's an interesting tidbit. I'm going to take. I did that trail, the Highline Trail. With Scott Jaime one year before I'd done any hundreds. I did a 50-miler, and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah,
I'm with Scott Jaime. He's in my job was to make sure we had the right gear.
Yeah,
I worked at Smith. I got discounts. I bought the gear. He was in charge of going. We were in charge of our own fitness. We parked the car, went to the other side. We did the whole thing. I got blisters starting at mile 7.
Fun.
Of 80 miles because I thought, I'm going to try these new shoes. These look pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right? And so we did this, and we went slow. I had some struggles. We finished, I can't remember the time. It was at like 40 hours. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And I could go back. Scott Jaime did a report. And this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, Davey Crockett came out, who, if you don't know him, he does a lot of research with ultra running and does stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently, we had an FKT, but we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't do it for that. And at the time, I don't know.
That wasn't really a thing.
No,
I mean, it was,
but he had our
really.
names listed once because he went back and, again, it was probably because he searched Stravas or whatever, saw our names at that time. So I don't even know if it was, but it like documented it might have been. So that was kind of interesting for me.
Yeah.
I looked back on that and going, what?
Yeah.
I had an FKT? But it wasn't. I mean, like I said, 40 hours, Jeff's done it in 20 because it came more of something to do. But it's a beautiful stretch, and it's slow.
It's slow.
Even for
and
fast.
So like, I talk about my buddy Ian Ferris that had a great day out there, and something he's really, because his goal is to finish something that's very similar to Hurt but way harder, that has 5 loops in the mountains in Tennessee. And so like, so his,
I don't know what that would be.
So
Charles.
his whole training is geared around how do I just sit in this slow gear all the time and never slow down.
Yeah.
And so like, that's why he did so well. And that's something I'm not good at, is like being comfortable in these situations. And I could list off things that he's done to prepare himself that are just silly things, silly lines that he's picked. That nobody knows about, and I won't go into it because that's not what he likes. But like, stuff that's taken him 60 hours.
Yeah.
And just for that mental, like, hey, I'm going to be out here. I'm going to go really slow, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's where I get almost claustrophobic in a race like Hurt because it's just slow.
Yeah.
And I start to get in my own head. And so I've got to figure out ways to simulate that slowness if I want to finish Hurt.
Yeah.
And I think the Uintas for me would be something that's in my wheelhouse, but is also really slow.
Yep.
And to kind of go out there in the dark, if I could get somebody to go with me, I'm trying to talk a few people into it, but even if I just go alone and just take my time and just get real comfortable going slow.
Well, I would go if I can speed up to go year slow.
Oh, we should go.
Because I love it there.
Yeah.
That was arguably one of the greatest experiences of my life.
And, just even if you're moving fast out there, you're not, because you've got to stop every once in a while to make sure you're on the trail. It's not really clearly marked. Water all the time.
They're filtering it.
Yeah, and you're carrying all your food for the whole time.
Yep.
Like there's all sorts of things that make you slow down, and
weather.
Yeah.
We got caught in a nasty
and you just
storm.
have to hunker down and wait for it to blow
There's
over.
There's a great photo of me laying in my rain gear on the ground, and Scott Jaime took a picture of me, and if you could read my face, I was nasty.
Yeah. And so I really think an effort like that would just do wonders for me. And the other thing that's easier in a way about that is once you're out there, you're out there.
Oh,
because there's no bailing.
Yeah, that's where we were at. We had a cart at the start and a cart at the
Yeah.
finish. You had to get one way.
Then there's no way to hike out of there. I mean, you're still 15 miles away if you want to try to hike out
from
and call
some
somebody.
drainage.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so just not having the option to get out of there except move forward. So those are things I've thought about, like how do I train my mental game? And I think, again, part of it's just continuing to race hundreds and continuing to run up against that and figure out how to push through.
Well, what's next then? What's next? What do you got?
So first up is the Miwok 100K.
Nice.
So I'm in Miwok for those that don't know.
It's a fast 100K.
Yeah, it's a fast 100K, but it's not as easy as you think. It's got like 11,000 feet of climbing, but it's all at sea level and on really nice trails in the Bay Area. So that's May 6th, I believe. And then after that, I don't have anything officially on the schedule. The Cascade Crest Lottery was yesterday, and I'm 88th on the wait list for it, which historically means I'm in if I want to.
Yeah.
So probably Cascade Crest, and then waiting for the Wasatch Lottery this next weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the idea is Miwok, and then build up for Cascade and maybe Wasatch, or maybe just Wasatch. I don't know.
What's the date of Cascade? I thought
they moved it up. So because 2 of the last 4 years they've had to change the course because of fires.
Fires, okay.
And so historically it had been at like the last weekend of August, and then now this year it's the 24th of July weekend.
All right. I was going to say Cascade and Wasatch. Yeah, that would be almost a back-to-back.
Yeah. So it's like 6 weeks between now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I'm looking at.
And then is your name going to end up in the Hurt Lottery again?
Yeah, it will. But I don't know if I'll draw out.
When is the Hurt Lottery open? Do you know
August.
Yet? August?
Yeah.
So you're going to put in again?
Yeah, I'll put in again.
So differently this year, you would go out by yourself and fly your family over the day of the race or the day after the race?
Probably after.
Yeah.
And maybe I just don't even fly them out and I just go out on a Thursday and drag somebody's butt out there with me. If you want to come, Eric,
Well, I'll wait for the invite.
Yeah, you can just talk to me all night and keep my mind off
I'll bring my mobile podcast studio.
We could just do a podcast on the trail. Yeah,
100 miles.
Yeah,
you'd be like, Eric, come on, man.
You'd get the Preston that only a few people have seen.
The Wu-Tang Preston.
Yeah, when the language starts flying and I get a little grumpy and.
We all get there.
Yeah, there was some good times at Wasatch this year. You should ask Seth Wattups about.
I have.
Okay.
We've had a couple words.
Yeah, Seth can tell you about when Preston got really pissed off about The Weeknd, the musician, as somebody was playing it loudly.
Don't do that, people.
I got really angry.
I don't like that. When I'm in a race and someone's got the external speaker.
Save Some Tears for Another Day was playing as I was sitting on the trail in the torture chamber. And I was
Are you sure someone was playing it and it wasn't in your head?
It happened. At least Seth's never told me it didn't happen.
He's going along with you.
Yeah.
He still wants to be your friend.
Yeah.
He's not going to tell you anything.
He's not going to tell me it was a hallucination.
That's funny.
Those runners didn't exist that ran by.
So, Hurt 100 2023, we're going to have a playlist ready.
Yep.
And we're going to be focused on other areas.
Yes, not just a singular focus. We've got to have multiple areas of focus and pillars in training.
So let me ask last question before we go, because I'm always interested in this because I've made a huge change, I'll say huge, a big change. But what was your nutrition on the course? You said your nutrition was dialed in.
Yeah.
I'm always interested, especially in 50 miles, that realm, and obviously more.
Yep.
What was your nutrition?
So I used Gnarly Fuel 2.0.
Okay. Which flavor?
So during the day, lemon lime.
Okay.
And then I had cherry cola at night because cherry cola has caffeine.
Yep.
And so I was doing at least one of those between aid stations.
Okay.
So sometimes that was a couple hours. Sometimes that was just, 90 minutes.
Did you have water as well?
Yeah, water as well. So 1 bottle of water, 1 bottle of the Gnarly, because you got to drink a lot out there because you're sweating like crazy.
And I always have water.
Yeah.
I don't care. I have to have some of that just blip.
And then I was alternating like just goo and spring gels.
Okay, what flavors?
So spring gels, I was using the Awesome Sauce and then the non-caffeinated Speed Nut during the day. And then with the goo, I was using like birthday cake and I think, what was the other one? It was like a s'mores one, maybe.
Could have been.
Yeah.
S'mores.
Yeah. So those were the ones during the day. And then at night I had Speed Nut with caffeine and I had, and then I just had like the naked goo. Has anybody ever had that? The nude? Simply Nude. It's just like...
Oh, the flavor.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking a new brand.
No,
I'm like, what?
No.
All right, yeah.
Simply Nude, I think it's called.
Yep.
And then I had another, like a chocolate outrage or something.
What's the Awesome Sauce flavor?
That's applesauce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I've had that one.
It's good.
I like the mango one the best.
Yeah,
still.
I like the mango one too, but it has a lot of caffeine in it,
Yeah.
so I try to hold off a bit. But
I do that one because I've switched.
Yeah.
I do a lot of gnarly.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing for a while, and hopefully we've got a show coming up to discuss that specifically. But one of our when we did our because Preston helped with the Christmas guide, and we didn't do a ton in nutrition.
Yeah.
And there's a reason. We'll have those reasons later with some podcasts. But historically, I've played around with different things, and I'm a lot of scratch.
Yeah.
Right? I still do like that, but then I've definitely picked up a lot of gnarly product.
Yeah.
I've done the greens. I've done the creatine, the BCAAs, the pre-workout, and the Fuel 2.0.
Yeah, the Fuel 2.0, like my energy levels, that stuff works really well.
Yeah.
And it goes down smooth. The flavor gets a little strong at times.
Yes, it does.
But it's just such a good energy source that your body still kind of craves it, even if the flavor's strong.
So what I've done is because you fill your bottle
Yeah.
full of water with that, and it's a strong flavor. Like some are pretty bland.
Yeah.
Not gnarly, but the gnarly is pretty strong. I take a pretty hard hit, and then I top it again with water.
Oh,
so
that's
that
a good
dilutes
idea.
it more for the
Yeah.
rest. So I take a hard hit, like very hard, and then I rinse with water so it doesn't have all the taste, and then I top it off with water, and it absolutely it dilutes the flavor, but you're still taking the exact amount of stuff.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that with that. And
Yeah.
I love it that way.
Yeah, Seth, my buddy Seth Wadups is always like a tailwind guy, and he always does half.
Yeah.
Like whatever they say, he just does half because it gets too strong. But
Yeah.
I like that idea because I need the calories.
Me too.
And so just taking that big, maybe even like a quarter or a third of your flask of it and then topping it off, I like that because then you're staying extra hydrated too.
Yep, and that's why I have that alternating with water. But I do that because calories are a key for me. Electrolytes obviously, but everything's got electrolytes anymore drink-wise, but it's the calorie component that I've really tried to really. There's a lot of reallys there. Really. But I'm trying to dial in better because goos get to me after a while, and I found if I can get it through the liquid source like that, it doesn't hit me as hard.
Yeah.
I think for me, again, everybody's different. It digests better, but when I've got those thick, heavy gels, sometimes I just feel like it takes forever.
Yeah.
To really
and I
get out of there.
I did eat quite a bit of real food too. It hurt, and I felt like that was helping.
Yeah,
because my body was running through stuff. Like you can tell when your stomach gets jumbled and it's not working through the calories, so then you have to back off. But I did tons of potatoes and rice balls. They had a lot of rice balls out there, and that was super helpful, energy wise. Again, I was fine.
Well, and I think it's different, and this is what I like to, when we talk about these things, and, we won't elaborate too much because we have some shows coming up, but on the nutrition side, don't get so laser focused on your nutrition that you don't take into account the course.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going to fuel differently for HURT than you will for MeWalk.
For sure.
MeWalk, you're running.
Yeah, and my heart rate's going to be elevated. I'm going to be burning.
Anytime you're hiking or that,
you
real
can
food,
take in real food
you can take
super
real
easy.
food. So that's why I do in races. If I know there's a climb coming, I real food it and hit the climb because you're letting it in your belly, you're letting it digest. But if I'm going downhill or flat,
you're just going to get it all jumbled up.
Yeah, you're going to have a fish bowl. You're going to have stuff moving around and, that type of thing. So that's interesting. I like nutrition's going to be a big topic of the Trail Manners podcast this year because I think we're faced with so many options now.
Yeah, there are tons.
Not just with nutrition for running, the products and the companies, but also just your daily nutrition, right? Or your training nutrition, because everybody reads about what everybody's doing, and I'm not a pro, but I know as well that not something works for everybody.
Yeah.
There's not one thing. It's not one magical pill you can take to fix. It's got to be this, what works for me on my, what I'm capable of eating, digesting, running, heat, all those things. So we'll cover that. But I was curious about that when you say you were so strong and felt so good, because nutrition is, I know, one thing that can derail a race quicker than anything. Yeah. So, well, right on, Preston. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for listening to me, everybody. Work through my mental issues there, but this sport's really hard.
It is.
And I think sometimes we get numb to that because it's what we do, so many of us, and it's just good to take a step back and realize that you need to give each race the proper respect.
Well, and I think it's that, but I think what you've hit so hard is you always hear and you always read and always see about training programs.
Yeah.
Right? Like running.
Yeah.
And that's very specific to the physical side, right? And like you said, you can be 100% dialed in physically, best shape of my life, I feel great, but there's these other aspects, whether it's nutrition, the mental game plays such a part both ways.
Yeah.
It can pull you out of a hole, but it also can put you in a hole. So I think that's one of the things you mentioned is like this sport is a challenge. We do focus so much on miles and vert and time and, speed work and, all these things that we don't, I think we need to at times, I'm not saying that we don't, but I think in general, everything else is second.
Yeah.
Right. But we all know when you're in a race, they all are just as important, right? It's not like one's more important than the other. They all play a part because we've been not as fit as we've thought we were and had a good day, right? Because mentally we wanted it so bad or something. So I think these are good things for listeners. I know, I've DNF'd, and I know sometimes it's really difficult to talk about a DNF because that's not your goal.
Yeah.
And it means you did not finish, right? And I understand that. So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing, because this podcast ideally is about helping people, right? It's about telling stories. It's about letting people understand what this sport's about, people that are getting into it, and there's people who have been into it for a long time that still haven't nailed it, right? Yep. So I think it's really good to have all the stories on and be real, be authentic. Still gave me goosebumps when you talked about why you DNF'd.
Yeah.
When it would have been super simple for you just to go into the aid station and go, man, that was a tough section, right? And get ready for the next one. And, my heart says people don't do that. But to hear that someone like yourself, that just makes me feel like, all right, we're still in a good place. People are still good. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. So thanks again for coming on the show. I'm sure we'll have you on again. I know that. But thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being real with us and telling us what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's hard sometimes to be vulnerable and just say, hey, I mentally gave in. But I thanks for letting me come on and talk about it more. All my friends have already listened to me a bunch, so I'll just keep talking about it. Anybody out there wants to talk to me about it, I'll keep talking.
There we go.
Thank you.
Well, sharp haircut. Thanks for cleaning up for the podcast.
Yeah, I had to look sharp for all the listeners.
All right, well, thanks again. This is Eric Manning signing off. The Trail Manners Podcast, episode 313, and we are out. Thank you for listening to the Trail Manners Podcast. I'd really like to thank Mr. Preston Wood for taking the time to join us again and talking about his Hurt 100 experience. I also want to encourage everybody to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Trail Manners, or swing by the website, trailmanners.com. There you can check out the store page, or you can hit us up on the contact page. Let us know what you want to see, who you want to hear, or if you would like to be on the show. And if you could just take a minute to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating or review on iTunes or Facebook, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, we would love any support via the Patreon account at patreon.com/trailmanners. Until next time, this is Eric Manning reminding you, you don't get what you wish for, you get what you work for. Now go get it.